Marriage Encounter. We are here to share tips, ideas, principles that will guide your marriage and make your relationship stronger, make your marriage more meaningful. With me, Pastor Green is Pastor Mark Braithwaite, and together we're going to be sharing today, uh, continuing our discussion on boundaries. And specifically, we are dealing with setting boundaries on yourself. And today we want to consider the whole concept of the good spouse.
Good day, radio friends. Good day, viewing friends. It's always exciting to be in your presence. We look forward to another wonderful submission today as we share. And again, I'm just so excited when I meet individuals and they indicate that they have been blessed by this program. We do this because we know that marriages and relationships need support, and that's what we're here to do. Just to support, to encourage, and to give you tools that you can use to allow your experience to be a wonderful one. So join us, shout somebody on the phone, send a text, let them know that Marriage Encounter is on today.
And we're grateful to those of you who, from time to time, send a note just to say how meaningful the program has been to you. We really do appreciate that, and we do want to encourage all of you to do that. We like to know that we are making a difference. We're going to begin with a word of prayer. Shall we pray? Father, be with us as we share with our friends in Radio Lands, our friends who are viewing on Facebook or on YouTube. We ask for your guidance and your blessings in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen.
So today, Doc, we are continuing rather our discussion on boundaries. This is an expansive topic.
Very, yes.
So we are going to be spending some time on it, but you will discover if you're listening that there are so many different facets, and it becomes so very applicable to the whole marriage relationship and success in your marriage. But today we want to talk about this whole matter of being the good spouse. In a relationship, sometimes people view one spouse as a good person. Oh, I wonder how she puts up with that disgusting man, or can't he see that his wife is such a miserable person, etc. So when that is the case, the other person, the one who is considered the good spouse,
And notice that when we say good, we say good in inverted commas, right?
That's right. Yes. So that the individual who perhaps has more open flaws, whose challenges are visible, and we're emphasizing that the challenges are more visible, because you can have challenges that are not so visible to the general public. It's quite possible that everybody may perceive you as such a wonderful person,
Right.
because they don't live with you.
Right, absolutely.
So the individual who has the visible challenges doesn't necessarily get the support. And all of the friends of the other one, the one who we would now consider the suffering spouse, this person is hearing from his or her friends, or your husband or your wife, let's just say your spouse is such a mean person, your spouse is so inconsiderate. And this makes them feel, or focus rather, on the flaws of the other, without taking time to see how they may be contributing to the challenges.
Yeah, very interesting. And when we think about it, oftentimes, as you mentioned, the one with the visible flaws is the one who everybody sort of gets down on. And the one who is considered the good spouse is considered as the suffering saint. You're in this thing and you just suffering, not realizing that focusing attention on the one who may have the visible flaws actually kind of does harm to the one who may not have those visible flaws, because they may see themselves now as upstanding, right, and may not be able to work on the invisible flaws that may be creating some of the challenges that the relationship is having.
So what we're saying, Doc, is that if you focus exclusively on only what may seem apparent in your partner without taking time to do personal reflection, you can overlook your own weaknesses.
Right.
And in a relationship, we like to say that relationships don't go bad by themselves. It is hardly ever one person who just gets up and does something wrong, because it's a relationship and because there's interaction between both parties, then they each make a contribution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some obviously more than others, but one, if because we're talking about boundaries, because we're talking about establishing markers, so to speak. If I'm not aware of my own challenges, it may be, if I tell myself I'm so good, I'm so
Right.
perfect, then
Right.
I don't have the need to be worrying about,
Right.
how I might be contributing to this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can overlook that. I can fail to see where I am going wrong and focus exclusively on my partner and his or her problems.
Right. It's such an important point because when we think about it, and you made the point that all of us have our own flaws and challenges, and that's the reality. But if we take the position that the problem is my spouse, then introspectively, I don't take the opportunity to look at where I am challenged as well, and when your friends kind of support you in quotes, supporting quotes, by highlighting the continual burdens of the spouse, the one who apparently is creating the visible problems, then it denies you the privilege and the opportunity to acknowledge where you have weaknesses and then to work on those weaknesses. So there might be a sense of superiority, so to speak, where I am better. So you need all the work and I'm okay, and you need to fix it. Or you're the one that's destroying this marriage, as opposed to, where do I fit into this entire picture? So in our field, doc, we talk about the whole notion of passive aggression. I'm just using an example here, passive aggression. So you have a person in a relationship who's flighty and will get on and make noise in the family, in the home. The other person is very quiet. But we have this saying in the Caribbean that says still waters run deep. Somebody can be very quiet but can be very intentional in their acts to hurt. So everybody sees the person who is always probably arguing and making a fuss and making noise, and everybody assumes that that's the person who's the problem. But when you get to understand the relationship, you also begin to realize that the other person, the quiet one, or the one who is considered as a suffering saint, has issues with passive aggression. So when a spouse does something, this person withdraws, becomes absolutely silent, doesn't talk to the person, does not give any type of emotional support, and just remains in their corner, which of course would be frustrating to any relationship. And that in itself is a problem. And so we're saying, hey, don't judge a book by its cover.
And Doc, we have said time and time again that marriage is a tender plant that needs to be nurtured.
Yes.
We have to be willing at all times to put in.
Mm-hmm.
If I begin to feel that I'm a victim here, I begin to think that I'm in prison
Right.
and I want to escape. And so there is a tendency for me not to put in the work. As you mentioned there, if I'm withdrawing, if I am shutting down, if I'm closing down all the time, and I fail to say, how can I contribute to building this relationship? You see, our attitude is very important in the relationship. Earlier, we spoke about the matter of commitment to the relationship. And if you don't have goodwill, if you don't desire to have a meaningful relationship, and you're not willing to put into the relationship, what's coming to my mind here, Doc, is a baby.
Mm-hmm.
If a parent is taking care of a baby and the baby is resisting, sometimes the parent wants the baby to, let's say, the parents want to comb the baby's hair,
Right.
and the baby is resisting.
Right.
If the parent just gives up and says, okay, that's your business, I'm trying to help you, and
You don't want help.
you don't want to help, do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That would be disastrous.
Very much.
You have to recognize this baby's survival depends on me.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell yourself that the survival of this marriage depends on me.
Right. And you have to work towards it, and that also involves acknowledging your own flaws, and that's the point we want to make. Don't ever think that because your spouse may have a glaring flaw that you don't possess any. And then you also have to make the effort, as you mentioned, to make it work by addressing your areas of course. Last time we spoke about the challenge of individuals who, because they're focusing so much attention on the spouse who has the problem, they don't focus any attention on themselves and try to, work with their own situations. And that in itself is challenging,
But
also.
somebody may be listening and may be saying, well, what in the world are you talking about?
Mm.
My husband is an alcoholic.
Right.
That's the problem in this marriage.
Mm.
So how can I be contributing to this? So they may be thinking, in a case like that, I clearly don't have an issue.
Responsibility.
So, and we are saying that certainly your spouse may be guilty of doing something inappropriate. In this case, we're using the example of him being an
Being alcoholic.
alcoholic, and definitely that is not a good thing. There are very many destructive issues that can arise from that.
Right.
But we are also saying at the same time, what are you contributing to the problem?
Right.
How are you dealing with it?
Right.
Is it that your husband is so frustrated that he is looking for comfort
An escape.
and an escape route, and so he goes and associates with his friends? Is it that he's not finding a friend in you? Stop to consider, am I really contributing to this issue? And that's kind of what we're saying.
Yeah, very powerful point. I think that was a beautiful example, and some persons off the bat may think, yeah, as you mentioned, if the person is an alcoholic, that's their problem. I don't contribute to that, but you may very well contribute to that person's alcoholism. Yeah, very true.
That's
Very
right.
true. Very true.
Now, another area, as we consider this matter of the good spouse, is that the good spouse, the one who is viewed as not having the issues, sometimes feels helpless in the relationship. You know, try to love, try to make a contribution, and maybe try to work with the individual, but the problem continues.
Right. Right.
And so they may get to the point where they feel, I am at my, as we like to say, my
Wits
wits'
end.
end,
Right.
and I don't know what else to do.
Well, in this case, the person feels that being good in quotes is about being caring and compassionate, and we speak about we're setting boundaries on us on self, right? So we're now looking at how do we kind of manage ourselves in the context of this relationship. So you feel that you have to be the good spouse. You also feel that by being the good spouse, I have to be caring and compassionate, not realizing, on the other hand, that you may be missing some elements, things such as limits, acknowledging consequences, being truthful and honest as a part of that journey. So even though you're being good and compassionate to your spouse, you also have to recognize that there are some limits to the way that you can extend yourself, because you can extend yourself to the point that it damages you as well. And so that balance is essential.
And in being good, you may be facilitating the problem,
That's absolutely true also.
because you may say, okay, he's suffering already, I really can't add to it.
Right.
When what you really need to do is to stand up
Right.
and say, this is it,
Right.
enough is
Is
enough.
enough, yeah,
And
yeah.
here is the whole concept of boundaries,
Right.
Doc. If he keeps using the money to buy alcohol, and so it's one issue is that
He's
the money is
drinking.
going.
Yeah. Okay.
And the second issue is that when he gets drunk, he becomes intoxicated, he's out of control,
Right.
he may damage himself,
Right.
and he may destroy things in the home, and he may be disrespectful to his parents, and not his parents, to his children, and to you, his spouse. So you will have to stand up and say, hey, listen, you need treatment. You're gonna have to go to the center.
Right.
We will not continue like this. So sometimes the good may, quote unquote good, may mean that you see yourself as an angel who wants to help, but the real help may be to stand up and say, I can't continue like this.
Any
I'm
longer.
going to take action. That person may not see you as good. And this is the other thing,
At the
a little shame issue come in here,
Yeah.
or guilt maybe. And the person may say, well, I'm down already and you're pushing me down. And the person may say, well, this is what good is right now, to help you.
Absolutely. It's so important because I feel like a lot of people can identify with this in their own relationships where For them, good is just, playing that secondary role where you just facilitate everything. You don't want to, you don't want to stir the waters, we would say. You want to try to keep everything kind of calm and smooth, and by so doing, as you use that word, you facilitate the challenge of your spouse, not realizing that you need to create that boundary for yourself to protect yourself, and also in the long run to protect the marriage. So I think what we're saying here is, in order to be honest to a situation, sometimes you have to confront that situation. You have to confront your spouse. You have to say to your spouse, enough is enough. We can't continue down this road because it's going to destroy the family. It's going to destroy, whatever, in some cases, savings we have. It's going to destroy the emotional stability that I have and that the children may have if you continue down this path. And so we need to, yes, I am compassionate. Yes, I'm caring. I'm supportive. But sometimes being supportive also means, pointing the person in the right direction for help and intervening to bring about that help. They have in counseling, oh boy, the term is escaping me, but there are times when you have an intervention. That's the term. An intervention where you put somebody in a situation where they have to confront the issue.
Well, I wanted to add this, Doc, and I'm saying this against the backdrop that the good spouse, quote unquote, sometimes feel pressured to appear to be a certain way in the eyes of the public.
Right.
And the temptation to stand up and take action, they may think would make them look bad. And I want to use a practical example that some people may have a challenge with. But this individual may have to come to the point where he or she says, this relationship is toxic. I'm going to have to move out. Or you are going to have to move out. And sometimes when a spouse packs up and leaves, or orders the other one leave, or gets intervention for the other one to leave, people suddenly begin to think, oh, he's wicked, she's wicked, he leaves his wife behind, or she leaves her husband behind. And that individual may sometimes have to risk the view of society. For one thing, society doesn't understand what is really going on, but this may be what is necessary for the other person to come to his or her senses. And sometimes moving out is a good thing. There are times when we recommend couples, hey, listen, your issues are so great, you probably need some space so that we can work with you. And it's just an example of how taking action, strong, firm stance against certain behavior traits or patterns may sometimes require you to look not so good in the eyes of public, but you have to have the moral fortitude to know that this is what is necessary at this time.
And I really want to, it's an amazing point. And I want to introduce some of the societal constructs that sometimes makes that so difficult. I remember in one of my programs, a colleague of mine presented a paper from his community, from his society. He was at a different society than ours, and he indicated in the paper that in their territory, for an individual to leave a relationship or to leave the company of their spouse is a big deal, even if things like abuse and so forth are taking place, because it's like a communal setting. And, if a person is going to leave, they have to go through so many different hoops, extended family members, neighbors, you follow what I'm saying? And in some cases, even, and this might be a challenge for some, but in some cases, even the church, when a person, as you said, you don't know what's happening inside, a person makes a decision that they're going to leave the environment. And when we encourage people to separate, Pastor, we do not encourage them to separate for the sake of separating. We usually encourage them to separate for the sake of getting additional help, with a desire to try to bring them back together at some point.
It may sound strange to say we're encouraging the separation for the purposes of reconciliation.
Right, that's it. That's exactly
because sometimes
what it is.
they're together, but they're not reconciled.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that being together and not being reconciled is often more damaging than them being separated, right?
That's right.
So I make the point that sometimes it is a difficult step to take because you have to go through so many levels and so many different perceptions from so many different people who you respect, people who you love, and they're saying to you, what are you doing? Why are you separating? Your uncle, your aunt, that's one level. Your neighbor, that's another level. A member at church or a church leader, they can't understand, and they think that you are the problem if you're making this choice to separate. But again, sometimes it's the only way for individuals to get the kind of relief and help that is necessary.
Which is why sometimes, when you're in these kinds of dilemmas, it's good to have a professional counselor,
Yes, absolutely.
somebody who can help you through that hurdle, because this is making a massive decision. This is
It
a big
is.
decision,
Yeah.
and you need to have good, faithful supporters, people who are praying for you and people who are encouraging you, but also somebody who has the professional qualifications,
Hmm.
the experience, the knowledge to be able to help you to see clearly, because sometimes your path may look very blurry, and if in the midst of the challenges you're having emotional challenges at home, you may feel down and empty and depressed, and so it's good to get that help.
Yeah.
Now, our desire is that relationships don't get to these points, but the reality is we do have lots of issues in many marriages, and what we're seeking to say is that if your marriage appears to be falling apart, it may be falling apart because you have failed to set proper
Boundaries,
boundaries.
yeah. And I want to make a disclaimer here quickly because, by no stretch of the imagination are we saying that, person should just separate for the sake of separating. And there are persons who may use this discussion as a means, just as an excuse to say,
Yeah,
I'm going to
long
separate.
time, a
Yeah.
long
you
time.
know.
I'm waiting to hear a pastor say I
Right.
could move out.
And
Mhm.
that's not what we're saying. We're saying that, there have to be parameters around a decision like that. It's a huge decision to make. And one of the major parameters is that if that does happen, it is totally with the understanding that you are getting professional help to bring you to
Mhm.
address the issues and prayerfully to bring you back together.
Most relationships can work if the proper care and guidance is given,
Hmm.
but also if the two individuals are willing. And sometimes your environment can become so toxic
Yeah.
that you cannot possibly see how it can work in that environment. And Doc, we've had so many successes
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
individuals who have had to move out of a toxic environment, and give us time to detox, so to speak,
Detox. Yeah.
the place
Yeah.
and the individuals, and
Yeah.
give them a fresh start. And it's always a joy to me personally to see when they overcome those hurdles and those
And they're
difficulties,
able to
how they are able
speak.
to go
Yeah.
and thrive, and
Yeah.
that's what it's really all about. That's our
Amen.
desire.
Amen.
Mhm.
Well, Doug, we only have a few minutes remaining, so we want to take the third one. And we're saying here that the good spouse can easily take, and we kind of mentioned it earlier, the morally superior position toward his or her spouse. So, as I said earlier, you feel as though you are better than. And you might think that because the person's contributions to the problem are not, may not be as obvious, he may think that I am not capable of being as destructive as my mate. So you take a superior position, thinking that you're better than your spouse's challenges are far more obvious, and you take a superior position, thinking that I could never be as terrible as that. I could never make those kinds of mistakes. I'm more balanced. I'm the better person here. You can take that morally superior ground position.
Now that's dangerous, and it's again we're saying you mentioned earlier, Doc, that sometimes when we have these kinds of challenges,
Mm.
some individuals have this tendency to think that I'm good, um, my spouse is destructive, etc., and therefore I'm the good one.
Right.
What that does sometimes is that and let me just add quickly, our time is limited, but we have to resist the temptation to take our cue from society,
Mm.
from
Mm.
those who are looking on,
Mm.
because a lot of times it's one thing for me to be on the outside looking in and coming to my conclusions without without getting a real experiential sense of what is happening. So it is not what society dictates that is necessarily what is right for you. That's important. We are saying that to think that you are the angel, you're morally superior because your spouse committed adultery, you didn't commit adultery. But again, for emphasis, you may not have committed adultery, but you may have been very, I want to choose my words carefully here, very destructive
Right.
with your words.
Right.
So you may
Yes.
have even been verbally abusive
Yes.
in a very sort of skillful way.
Right. And destroy that person's self-esteem in the process.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because you may say things like, you're no good for yourself.
Right. Right.
I regret marrying you. It's the biggest
You
mistake in
don't.
my
You
life.
never
And
get
that
things
kind of thing.
right. You know.
And then that person begins to feel so unloved,
Yes.
so crushed, so naked. Now it's never an excuse for them to go out and commit adultery or anything to that effect. But if there is not the affective quality that is growing in the relationship, then we have a challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, individuals who do not see themselves in a position where they where they see themselves in a position of sort of being perfect, they're not open to receiving forgiveness, and neither are they open to receiving love. They never feel like they need to be forgiven for anything, or that they need to experience a kind of love that is nurturing and will help to build them, because they feel as though they're already where they need to be. And so that is quite damaging and painful and hurtful in the context of any relationship.
Well, I think our time has just about expired. So we just want to say to our viewers and listeners that if you do have questions or comments, and I'm sure you may have a lot of questions concerning some of the things we shared today, feel free to drop us a line. Write to us at marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. Or if you're viewing online, if you're viewing on Facebook or on YouTube, you can just write a question in the chat there and submit it to us. And we will, from time to time, we just take some time to respond to your questions. It was a joy being with you on the airways. And we wish you God's blessings and a successful marriage. Doc?
Well, as we close, remember that as we set boundaries, we have to protect self, but we also have to acknowledge and be aware of who we are and our own shortcomings. And so as you take this journey, never forget to ask yourself the question, could I be a part of this problem?
Well, that's all for today. Until next week, same time, may God's richest blessings be yours.